You're listening to Trailblazers.fm, an interview-styled podcast that delves deep into bold conversations with successful Black entrepreneurs and leaders. Join us weekly to learn actionable strategies, valuable tactics, and innovative tools that you can put to use immediately on your journey to blazing your trail. And now, here's your host, my husband, Stephen A. Hart.
Blazer Nation, good morning. Happy Wednesday to you. I'm so grateful to be here with you this morning. I was having a conversation with a dear brother of mine a couple weeks back and said, you know what? We need to rock together on Wednesday mornings. And I want you to give thought to some other amazing brothers that we can have conversation with. And so that's led to this morning being able to join forces to have a cup of Joe and be able to just reason with two amazing brothers. So this morning I am blessed to be joined by my brothers Shawn Dove and Greg Corbin. Shawn is the founder of the Corporation for Black Male Achievement. He's the co-author of I Too Am America. And my brother, another man of many words, both of them are wordsmiths, but Greg Corbin is a social entrepreneur, a DEI professional, and also an author of Breathing Ashes. And so just want to say good morning to you both, and thank you so very much for rocking with me this morning.
Good morning, Brother Stephen. Good morning, Greg. And as always, excited to be in the community with you. And thanks, Stephen, for sharing and inviting us on to your Trailblazers platform. So excited to be here, and want to say big ups to your audience, audience this morning.
Good morning, Blazer Nation. I see Freddie, I see Annette, I see Robert, I see Ralston. So many of you rocking with us this morning. Thank you so much for being here. So Shawn, talk to us about what we're talking about today.
Sure. When we had this idea of coming together, I said, who do I want to bring onto the platform with me? And one of the first individuals that came to mind was Greg Corbin. And I've known Greg. I first met Greg in 2010 in Philadelphia as part of the Campaign for Black Male Achievement. We were hosting a regional gathering in Philadelphia. And this young man graced the stage, and he was the founder, and we'll hear more about this, of the Philadelphia youth poetry movement. And he came on stage and, did a spoken word piece. And it was just his exuberance, his energy. And from that moment, we have been big brother, little brother. And he's a creative. He has just published a book, Breathing Ashes. And we're going to hear more about that. But we've been talking a lot about just the creative process and dealing with resistance. And I remember having a conversation with Greg last year sometime, I believe it was. And I was sitting on my deck. We were doing a Zoom. And he's a new father, right? His son, Noble, is, I think, like 10, 11 months. And his wife, Helena, was pregnant. And I asked Greg, what are you pregnant with? And he may recall that conversation because he's bubbling with so much energy, so much creativity. And he was pregnant with this book. But we spent a lot of time together, and the whole process of getting it out, right, and pushing it out. and just wanted to share that because anyone, whether you're an entrepreneur, professional, and you have an idea or an initiative, resistance is inevitable. And, Stephen, I've shared the book by Stephen Pressfield, The War of Art, that talks about overcoming resistance. And so just wanted to have a conversation and, get you two creatives on board to have that conversation about overcoming resistance. So I want to pass it on to Greg, right? When I asked you that question, what are you pregnant with as your wife was pregnant? What was that like, and what has that evolved into, and what was the resistance? I see you got the nice prop in the background of Breathing Ashes, but tell me, what was that like?
Well, first of all, I just want to say good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here on trailblazers.fm. I appreciate it, Steve, for you helping us get this off the ground, and Shawn with the visionary leadership. That is indeed the big brother, so to speak. But, what was I pregnant with when my wife was pregnant? One, I was definitely present with the process of her growing a human being inside of herself. I think that's not to be understated. But at the same time, while we are both in this collective creative mode with a person, there was this lingering passion in the background with an idea that I never fully was able to get off the ground. It's the pandemic, and you're thinking about all these things you never did and the what ifs. And so that's how Breathing Ashes came into play. And we thought about the title. It was like, the title is amazing, and we got to make sure that the title makes sense. And Breathing Ashes made sense because, I think we all come to a place in our life where we are at an intersection of transformation and transition. And that's a scary place to be at, because what happens is you start to shed parts of yourself that you no longer need. And whether that's through a thought, through a behavior, or through a relationship, or situations and circumstances. And so I thought about what that looked like. So I think a huge part of the resistance was actually aligning myself with the title, right? Like the title itself. I'm actually still going through the process of what it looks like to breathe ashes in connection with the concept of the phoenix and how you're always resurrecting, right? And so thinking about that, the resistance is internal and external, because it's not just a creative aspect that you're in pursuit of. You're in pursuit of your higher self, your better self, your better professional self, your better personal self, your better husbandhood, your better father, all these things. And I think a lot of it is also, how do you get past the trauma that becomes the imposter in your mind? We talk about imposter syndrome a lot. And I think sometimes I'm like, imposter syndrome, you mean self-doubt? You mean the demons in the back of your mind? You mean the other angel on your shoulder telling you you're not good enough? Oh, you mean you, right? So sometimes the imposter is this monster of doubt that we create inside our own minds. And so, Breathing Ashes is about, embracing the fire, embracing the flame, and then saying, okay, here's some ashes. I got to sweep these away. I got to breathe these away. So it's a constant transformation. And that's what the ideology of Breathing Ashes is about. It's about embracing this daily transformation and this daily sense of becoming and letting go simultaneously with every breath.
Wow, that's a lot there, brother. And you touched me when you talked about, trauma, talked about self-doubt and the imposter syndrome, right? And certainly can relate in all of my creative pursuits and births and productions throughout my career. That has always been the chief resistance, right? That voice in my head that says, who do you think you are to be bold and bad and big enough to want to do something that's really great, right? And I'm wondering, this imposter syndrome, and Stephen, you can jump in at any time. what's been your antidote, right? And I'm glad that you said it's a daily practice, right? Because every morning, at least for me, right, when I get up and I pray, I have a choice, right? Are you going to lean in, or are you going to sit on the sidelines to, from that which is calling you? But as you know, your creative career, right, pushing out breathing ashes. What's the antidote to that imposter syndrome for you?
If I could just jump in, I think of the last year, and we're talking about being creative in a season of dealing with life as a whole. And Greg touched on both the internal and external challenges that we face. Man, there are many days that I can't focus on the day, that I have to literally get up and just think, hey, you know what? I have to focus on the first step. I have to focus on the next minute, the next hour. I can't think of the day because I'm paralyzed by, the talking about the trauma, talking about imposter syndrome, talking about all the things that you worry and are anxious about. I had my first bout with anxiety, with a panic, anxiety attacks back in October of last year. And it consumed me. I was unable to function in work, in life, for my family, for my wife, for my kids. Forget creating, right? It was paralyzing, and I had to be able to remove what was consuming me with all the what if scenarios. My therapist actually said, the anxiety is us dwelling in a future what if scenario that doesn't even exist. Right. And so overcoming really entailed me kind of dealing with the here and now, taking it one step at a time, and actually learning to live in the present moment and not getting consumed by tomorrow.
That's good.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought up therapists. Like understanding the importance of processing information that's not just coming from the outside world, but the information you're generating internally. Because you don't grow up in a society where it's like, hey, today we're going to talk about mental health, right? Like that's not found inside of a school. You don't find that in many schools. It definitely wasn't in school when we were growing up, right? Because a lot of these things are manufactured from inside. There's moments where I'm like, I want to cry, and I'm not as sure if it's about disgust, or it's about joy, or it's about glee, or it's about being awkward, right? Like this idea that we can't express our emotions, being as though we're men of color. I think that plays a role too, in how we see resistance and creativity. Because let's be real, we live in a society that when we're too creative or too loud, it wants to put some guardrails on it, right? If you think about the idea of Michael Jackson and Michael Jordan, these are two of the most prominent superstars in their industries. One is professional sports, the other one is professional entertainment. They had an abundance of resources and money thrown at them. Same thing with LeBron James. You can think about Simone Biles. You can think about all these people, but is that like we trust, especially men of color, with resources and funds when we can watch them. And I've always thought that was interesting. I don't want to take this conversation to a different angle, but I'm gonna keep it
free flowing. It's free flowing conversation. Yeah. Take it where
brother.
The system creates an ideology or an environment of surveillance on Black bodies all the time. And I want to say this too. It's on everybody. Big Brother's on everybody. But when it's designed around a certain person or a profile, so to speak, a homogenous approach to looking at the world, then it's like, we don't see them with the resources, but the men of color though with the resources, we got to watch them because things might get better, right? And so I think Breathing Ashes is also looking at inside of the book. You will see me talking about systems. You'll see me talking about the trauma. You'll see me talking about leadership trauma. And I think that's the interesting piece. We're all leaders in a certain capacity in certain ways. And what you find out as an organizational leader is that you start to see pockets of yourself pop up inside the organization. You're like, oh, is that perfectionism again? Oh, is that bad time management again? Oh, is that misappropriated funds? Wow. These things come with running the organization because nothing is perfect. But if you're not strong enough in your own self-awareness, the resistance will creep up on you and swallow you up whole. And then you'll lose your confidence because you'll start judging yourself, because the idea of surveillance, everybody's watching you. And it's really, really interesting.
I'm glad that you brought up the term self-awareness. One of my favorite books is The Messy Middle by Scott Belsky, right? And he talks about in The Messy Middle in entrepreneurial and creative endeavors. We talk about the launch and the origin story, and we talk about the end, whether it's the conclusion or it's the IPO or whatever. But we never talk about the hard psychological work of any bold venture in the messy middle. And one of the things he says is that self-awareness is the only sustainable competitive advantage in a creative pursuit, right? In business. And, one of the things, and you both heard me say this you talked about leadership. I say to all leaders, right? If you don't have an executive coach, a mentor, and a therapist along your pursuit, it's going to be challenging. And a lot of folks, want to maybe disconnect mental health therapy to the creative pursuit. But I think that is one of the key things to resistance. And what I would say for particularly Black men, this whole notion of self-compassion and being compassionate with ourselves, right? Because we fall into this whole John Henryism that I got to prove this, I got to prove that, I got to do instead of be. And for me, and I'm sure both you and Stephen can identify with this, in therapy, one of the things I realized, for the last 3 decades, I've been on this performative, proven that I am a leader, right? And that came out of, 31 years ago, resigning from being an executive director of the youth program that I grew up in, going into recovery. And it was only through therapy that I had to take a look at how I was responding to that trauma and wanting to prove. And that self-compassion piece is so important, right? And so, Stephen, thank you for lifting up and being vulnerable and sharing, your process and dealing with your depression.
Yeah, and I love that we get to normalize therapy and normalize, as men, as Black men, the importance of. I had many conversations prior to. Actually, my wife, and let me just big up Kristen Hart right here. A year ago, January, saying, "Hey, your dad just suffered a stroke." I came back from Jamaica, and she said, "Hey, I'm gonna get you. I have 2 appointments for you. One for you to see your doctor, the other for you to see a therapist." And I did not receive that. I've shared that here several times. I was like, why'd you get me an appointment with a therapist? I don't need to talk to anybody. Nothing's wrong with me. And she said, hey, it's covered by our insurance. Basically simmer down, go talk to the therapist. If it's not good for you, then that's fine. That's what kept me alive last year.
Wow.
Right? For the brother that's listening to my voice right now that hears us talking about therapy, listen, that's something that even now I'm not in that dark hole that I was back in January of 2020, but I maintain that conversation every week, every other week, to ensure that I have somebody that can help me to organize my thoughts, that I can speak to and not be concerned about where they, that they have an opinion or an angle to take. That conversation is one, just like you'd go to the doctor for a checkup to make sure everything is fine. That's that checkup to help you organize your headspace. And so if you're giving it thought and you're concerned about it, just try it out. Like Kristen said, no harm can come of it. And if it's not needed, you keep it moving. But don't knock it till you try it.
Mm. So, in Stephen Pressfield's book, he talks about, this is the war of art, right? Break through the blocks and win your inner creative battles, right? Inner creative battles. He talks about how assistance is the antidote to resistance, right? And I look at us three brothers on this screen, and I think you all have heard me do the parable of the talents remix story, right? The three servants incorporated, right? And I think it's important, right? Because sometimes we have a tendency, let me speak for myself. I have a tendency like, oh, I can do this, right? I can do it alone. And the parable of the talents remix is like, suppose, we all know the parable, right? The master was going on a far off journey, and to one servant he gave 5 talents, to another servant he gave 2 talents, and to another he gave 1. And the brother with the 5 talents, he went out and he doubled his 5 talents, and the brother with 2 talents did the same. But the brother with 1 talent, what did he do? It was call and response. He buried his talent.
He buried it, yeah.
And why did he bury his talent?
Never thought it was enough to do anything positive, yeah.
And he was afraid.
Yeah.
And I always think about, what if the brother with the 5 talents went and found the brother with the 2 talents, and he said, let's go find this brother with the 1 talent. That one, and they were each given talent according to their ability. Let's find this joker with the 1 talent. And then they put all of their talents together, and they formed 3 servants incorporated. And when the master came back, they were all blessed, right? That whole notion of assistance and collaboration, and us getting vulnerable and asking for help and assistance, right? And Greg, I would love to hear, what was the kind of assistance you with producing Breathing Ashes?
Yeah. Is this mic working great, y'all? Is this good? We good?
Yeah, we got it.
All right. So I think for me, the assistance was the woman of my dreams, my wife. That was the main assistance. My wife was handling a lot of the administrative piece, keeping me inspired, keeping me with a timeline, holding me accountable to that, finding a person who could edit and can help compose it, because we're talking about over 10 years of work in one side of a book. It's an anthology. It's essays, poetry, prose, and some social critiques, ranging masculinity, mental health, hip hop, healing trauma. It's just so much in the book. It's still really trying to figure out exactly what the book is capturing. I know the one thing it captures is this intersection of transformation, and what happens when you get to a place where you say, who the hell am I? Simply put, like, after I take off all the tropes and all the identities, who am I, right? And so my wife had to remind me who I am and what I'm capable of. So when you talk about burying talent, you're talking about Breathing Ashes being a result of burying talent for over 10, 15 years underneath the shadow of community development and helping others. I stopped helping myself. I stopped developing my own talent as a creative because I was giving away myself as a professional. And that was leaving me empty and dry, because God did not put me here just to be some type of leader or professional. God put me here to engineer change and innovation and curiosity and imagination in ways that other people are afraid of. It's that simple. So my wife had to remind me of who I am, whose I am, and what I'm capable of on a daily basis. And to this day, she's reminded me who I am. So when you think about assistance, it's not just my ancestors and the elders around me and angels or whatever else you want to call them. It's literally waking up, looking at my assistants, right? I'm waking up looking at my son, my assistants. I'm having conversations with you, Shawn, and Steve, and other people who are my assistants. It takes a village to raise a child, but it also takes a village to raise a family. It takes a village to raise an idea. It takes a village to get that idea from end to end. And often we forget it takes a village because we get caught up in this idea of this hero story for ourselves. I did this on my own. Look at me. Look how strong I am. Look how limiting you are.
Mm.
You could have pulled other people's gifts and talents to the table to amplify your vision and at the same time give them an opportunity for them to walk in their purpose. But you deny them of that because you were being so shielded and bottled up with your idea and allowing ego, which is easing God out, to dictate everything else around you. You could have got 10 steps further than the one step you made by yourself.
That's breathing ashes right there. All right. So one of the things for me with overcoming resistance entails getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? And I remember when I was running a youth newspaper in Harlem, one of our guest speakers was a sister named Terry Williams. And Terry Williams, a PR maven, the author of The Personal Touch, Black Pain, Just Looks Like We're Not Hurting, and something that, two things that Terry said that I wanted to share and get some reaction from both of you brothers. One thing she said was, and she was saying it to the young people, but it boomeranged. I was like, no, this was meant for me as well. She said, if you are not leaving your house most mornings with butterflies in your stomach because of what God has called you to do, you are not living up to your potential. And I think Terry, if you know Terry, she brought it a little harder than that. I think she said, you're pathetic. I was like, God, that's a little hard for the kids, Terry, right? And, the butterflies, right? So how do you deal with those butterflies? And the other thing that she said was, what you think is your curse could be really your blessing in disguise, right? And those two things that in my creative pursuits, right, and dealing with the butterflies and being uncomfortable, starting when I'm not ready, and knowing that two things can be true. You can be brave and afraid at the same time.
I love that, man. You guys with the fire this morning. This is blessing my soul, and I can see that Blazer Nation is loving this conversation. Last week I was sharing with I had the pleasure of finally getting back on a live stage at Podcast Movement last week, and talking with the crowd. I was thinking back to times in this past year during the pandemic, we've been stuck in the house. And there are times where, man, I love my wife and I love the kids, but I'll just jump in the car and I'll just drive, right? I'll just jump in the car and drive for an hour. And I'm driving around town with nowhere to go. And, I'll end up coming in a circle and come back to the house an hour later. And that was fine for clearing my headspace. But how many of us are driving in circles every day with no clear direction, right? How many of us have not done the work to get clear on where it is we're trying to go? And so in seasons like this,
Wow.
where we have no clarity, we end up on the roundabout going nowhere. And I think, we have to really get crystal clear on what is that vision, right? Greg, I hear you talking about, the process for breathing ashes. Shawn, I've been on your journey with you for the last several years, watching the development of you birthing I2M America. But it starts with a vision, right? It starts with you getting really clear on, where am I trying to go with this? Back in 2016, I wrote out some goals, some big, what I call big, hairy, audacious goals. And I wrote those things down. And it was in the season of last summer where, I'm stuck. In the season of last fall, dealing with anxiety attacks and panic attacks and being stuck. And saying, hey, let me get off this roundabout. Let me stop driving around here aimlessly. Where am I trying to get to? And being able to see the goals that I had set and being able to talk with myself, have those internal conversations and say, is this still where we're trying to get to? Because if it is, we need to stop driving around town. We need to get back on the road, right? I like it, and sticking with a road analogy. I often say, sometimes that destination, that vision in your head is the end goal. If I'm driving from Maryland to Jersey, I'm turning on Google Maps. Jersey's the destination. But somewhere along that journey, Google Maps is going to say, hey, there's an accident up ahead and I can reroute you, right? There's a pandemic that was, ahead of us last year, all of us last year, and many of us had to reroute. But if you still want to get to the destination, yes, the path might take you a longer, it might extend the journey. But if you know the destination, you can still get there, right? And I think that's a challenge for many of us is we've not clarified the destination. We've not clarified the vision for our lives. And I think all of us need to do the work to make sure, we know where we're trying to drive so that we can overcome the obstacles in our path and be able to still get to where we're trying to go.
I'm gonna let Greg go in, but that whole destination piece, Stephen, because sometimes we focus on destination, but not direction, right? And it's the direction that's going to get you. Like, so you talked about, the goal and the North Star, right? If I'm like going for my North Star, but my direction is east, west, or even south, I'm never going to get there. I'm never going to get there. And so, Brother Greg, talk a little bit about, this direction, destination, and what else you got percolating? Because I know, breathing ashes is not a finality, right? That is just one creation, one production in a line of things. What else you got percolating along the way?
So I'll start with the destination, Stephen, your metaphor of like, just you're on a journey, right? And needing this GPS, and I can think of 1,000 different creative acronyms for GPS. But what I will say is like destination and the word destiny go hand in hand. And I think we give our power away. We're taught to give our power away when we think about how we're journeying there. But also the denial of hard work that it really takes to find clarity. You're talking about some people fast for months. They meditate for years. They go to mountains. Think about Moses, right? Moses climbs Mount Sinai, and he's on this mountain, and he's there for weeks, and it's cold up there because I climbed it. And you're looking out, and it looks like just canyons, and it's beautiful, but it's like rocks, and he's just on this like, out there, and you're looking like you have to find such a level of silence sometimes that you need to fight for, you need to earn, you need to work out for, just to find that voice. And that's what Stephen was getting at, because I'll do the same thing and I'll just fall into it though. I won't intentionally go for the ride. I'll just be like, should I go home? Next thing I know, I'm riding around for another hour with no destination because I'm fighting for clarity. Like I'm looking for direction. And I think it's something courageous about trusting the voice that's coming from within, even though the world may have different perspectives based on an environment they don't even see coming because you've already seen it, because the environment is all mental, hence the word environmental. And so you got to be wary of the climate you got going on in your mind and how that affects your spirit, which is energy that you create and generate and bring forth to the world. And that's what's contagious. When people see that, they can connect and they can align. So when you think about, what direction I'm going or what clarity I'm going, fighting for, my next steps, I'm still working on. I'm still building that muscle for what that's going to be. I'm thinking about what does it look like to build merchandising around this concept of breathing ashes, right? Do I go back to college? Do I create my own business and really pursue that and really lock into what I believe in? Do I create these other creative ventures? So there's two things I'm thinking about as I step back into performing and working with universities and schools of higher ed is in corporations is this concept of climate change as it relates to environmental activism and what companies can do and what organizations and universities can do. And I'm thinking about climate change as a relationship, the symbiotic relationship between human beings and the planet and human beings. Like we're looking at all these forest fires. I don't know if y'all saw what happened in Turkey, but the idea of a fire creeping up on a tourist destination, right? It's on a beach and a fire creeps up and people are stuck between literally the ocean and moving through fire. Like this, think about that idea that we've seen it happen on this planet. Mm-hmm. Now, luckily, they had to go down the beach to get out another way. But just imagine if you're stuck between fire and water, what are you going to choose? And you can only swim for so long. And who knows if you can navigate a fire? Most people try to take the water probably because it's buoyant, you can float, and your body's 75% water. Right. And so you think about all these things. I'm thinking about the symbiotic relationship between our bodies, our behaviors, and industrial revolutions, and what we're doing to the planet in relationship to how the planet is responding. Every earthquake is not for naught. Every tidal wave is not for naught. Right. Think about we're digging into a planet. So these are the things I'm thinking about as I think about what else is percolating that I know is needed. Because how often do you hear, individuals of color saying, yo, y'all can talk about all this other stuff, but like we fighting for territory, trying to colonize parts of the planet in a world where the planet looks like it may not want us here anymore. So I'm thinking about my son. I'm thinking about my future children. I'm thinking about generations in front of us that we have to continuously heal ourselves so we can heal the planet. That's just one angle of who I am, right? And you can hear the passion coming through because I really think about this. Like I have a biology degree, science is my thing. The other piece is Black male security. What does it look like to be safe during vulnerable times? And looking at financial security and wealth building, looking at emotional wellness and emotional security, looking at intellectual security, intellectual property, and looking at physical safety and how those things intermingle. So I'm working on pieces that are going to create this production that are going to highlight what does it look like to be secure in a Black body, specifically from a cisgender Black male's perspective. And that's what I want to take into these spaces to get people thinking differently about diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, and belonging. So that's what's percolating besides a small shirt company. Well, I pulled all that out of me because I was like, yeah, I'm really talking about this. Like, thank you for the question because it prompted me to see how much work I've already done as I'm fighting in building the muscle of clarity.
Mm.
Well, fighting the resistance and building the muscle of clarity.
And I think percolating inside of you is an understatement. What you just described is more of an eruption than a percolation, and hearing all of that. And one of the things around overcoming resistance is, I know for me, having too many ideas.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And being able to prioritize, right? My setbacks and trip ups has always been wanting to do so much or too much at one time. And the ability to prioritize all that is percolating and erupting is important. And I think that's why it's really important to have people in your lives. I was in a conversation with Stephen on Sunday. He was like, we were talking about deadlines. He's like, I'm calling you on like an accountability, right? He was like, all right, I'm taking off my little brother hat and got in my face with accountability. But that whole notion of because creatives are creative, right? And being able to prioritize, I think, is one of the things to overcome a resistance. Steve, what do you say about that?
Man, and then I can't even hold you accountable because I got like wind damage taking apart half my deck last night. But no, listen, you touched on something that's real important as creatives. We have I wake up today and I'll see something online and an idea hits me. And being the markets and the brand guy that I am, I'll be like, oh, let me go buy the domain name because one day I'm going to build that business. And then I go in GoDaddy and I own like 40 domain names. And I'm like, Steven, like, we don't need to be spending, this much money every year on GoDaddy because you're never going to be able to, live out all these different things, right? So the thing is always getting things down on paper as a creative and documenting those ideas. But we really need to stop and have something that allows us to say, hey, you know what? What's the 5 most important things that you love doing, that you have a passion for, that the world needs, but most importantly, that you can get paid for, right? Some of them we're not going to get paid for, and that's okay. Mm. But at the end of the day, we got to put food on the table. We're all husbands and have kids, right? We got to provide. And so when you start putting things in context of, okay, as a creative, these are the things that I'm most passionate about, that I love doing, that the world needs, and that I can get paid for. And then say, hey, you know what comes first, second, third, and so on. So when the new ideas come, you still have to put it in that, context of where does this fit? Is this something that's going to replace the things that are top on the list? Or does it just need to be added to the queue, of things that I can come to at some point in time? Well, we have to get clear, and the fight for me is always like, hey, as a Jamaican, y'all know I got like 17 jobs, right? I'm working for the Sands Institute by day, but beyond that, I have Trailblazers. Beyond that, I have Brand in Demand. Beyond that, what else can fit in any crevice that is left open? Because these crumb snatchers want my time too, right? They want time with their dad at the end of the day. So, very, very important.
Stephen, something you said earlier, and Greg also, this is about the inner conversations and the stories that we tell ourselves, yes. Right? And the voices are within, and how we reframe the narratives that we are telling ourselves that allow it to be more self-compassionate with ourselves, more asset-based conversations with ourselves. And recently, as you both know, at the beginning or the end of last year, we sunset the campaign for Black Male Achievement after 12 years. And, before the pandemic, we were experiencing some organizational preconditions. But, I've had this conversation with both of you. So at the time, the narrative that I had and the story I was telling myself was, you failed. It was a failure. It was a failure. And that was the loop. And the importance of sharing that therapy and having folks in your lives, I had to take a step back and reframe that. And I was like, hold up, no, Shawn, that wasn't failure. Look at all that you have done, right? The campaign was supposed to be a 3-year initiative. It's 12 years later. Look all that you've seeded. And I realized in that moment, if you can reframe your seeming failure, you can reframe your future, right?
Wow.
And that there's somebody that's listening. When you talk about overcoming resistance, right? Part of that is overcoming what you thought was your last failure, right? Brother Jason Wilson has been telling me for the last month, Shawn, your unfinished business is not behind you.
It's in front of you.
It's in front of you.
Woo. Yeah, you just set a bar, as we say. You really dropped some tokens that can help us get through the turnstiles. So I got a question for both of y'all. What is the way you address failure on the daily? Right? Are you aware enough to see the failures and then flip them in a different way to reframe them?
So, great question. And frankly, I oscillate with how I embrace. And, some days I'm like, yeah, failure is my friend. I'm using it for a motivation. What happened to me happened for me. And then there are some days where the weight and the heaviness of seeming failure is deep, right? And when I isolate, the story of it's deep and it becoming, the weight. And that's why, every Thursday, 4 p.m., I'm in therapy, right? I got regular sessions like this. And so, there is that, scared money don't win, right? And understanding that, okay, Shawn, there is going to be failures, right? And get out of your head. And the last thing I'll say before passing on to Stephen, I got to just lift up this brother, Roderick Miller, right, who facilitated a campaign for Black Male Achievement retreat in 2019. And he looked at it was for the entire team, but he looked at me when he said this was, you have nothing to prove, only gifts to share. And that's the story I got to keep telling myself with failure, right? Because logically we know that you can't succeed without failure, right? And, setbacks are stumbling blocks. But we internalize that. And so the conversation, to myself is a reminder, Shawn, you have nothing to prove, only gifts to share. And there are some days I'm like great with that. And there are other days, not so much.
So true. So many things come to mind as I'm thinking about that. By default, we often relate failure to our professional lives and what we do in a work capacity as leaders, as entrepreneurs. But I feel every day in life as a husband, as a father, as a leader, as an entrepreneur, as a creative. And more, what I've learned to do is call myself. So I'm a Taurus, right? We're bullheaded, and I'm stubborn. And so naturally, I love to just push away. But I'm learning, like, listen, you know, when my wife calls me out, when the kids, my 11-year-old now is calling me out on my junk, right? Like, dude, you messed up. I'm learning to accept and acknowledge where I am feeling. And that's the first step for me, is calling it out, right? And accepting it, and being, so before you can even learn, because Shawn just touched on this, we love to say sometimes, like, hey, you know, can't succeed if you can't fail, right? But the first thing is to know that you did fail, is to call it out, to accept it, to acknowledge it, and especially to those that we love, not being so stubborn to fight and to be like, nah, you know, and try to prove a point. When we mess up as men, we need to accept, to be man enough, to call ourselves out on our mess ups. I can't listen for nothing when it comes to marriage. Right? My wife and my daughter be like, "Yeah, we told you that 10 times," and I can listen to you guys in an interview, but you know, my wife will tell me something 10 times and I can't hear her. Right? But I am learning to be more open to accepting, to acknowledging the failure, and then seeing where we move from there. Seeing, you know, what the next step is. That transparency sometimes scares people in the work world, because I'm always quick to say, yo, that was my bad, right? I own that. How can we fix it? How can we address it? And you know, open your palms, man. You know, don't be so tight-fisted to be like, yo, no, that's not my bad. Let's fight. Right? Open your palms and give that other person a hug, and make your, you know, humble yourself, and take it, you know, take the next step. That's how we learn from the failure. That's how we move through it.
And you know, Greg, as creatives, we're all inclined to, this is natural to want to always be looking out the window as a creative, right? Casting the vision, looking where we're going. Looking in the mirror, not so much, right? And balancing the looking out the window and looking in the mirror, right? And spending time looking in the mirror, I had to admit, oh, you used to accuse everybody else of being a perfectionist, but you're a perfectionist too, right? And your perfectionism is a barrier to your creative pursuits, right? Because you want to get things perfect, right? And you delay, right? And so that's self-awareness and looking at yourself, right? And you know, my therapist reminds me, like, she's like, you do know you're human, right? And giving yourself that, you know, a sense of self-compassion. I'm wondering, you know, I'm looking at the time and I see a breathing ashes behind you. And one of the things I just want to lift up is when you, I remember us having a conversation, Greg, me asking you what are you pregnant with? And you were pregnant with breathing ashes. And then I watched you accelerate the delivery of breathing ashes. And your acceleration was my elevation, because I was like, wow, Greg came out with his book. Let me elevate with my book, right? Because it was kind of a nudge, right? If wow, Greg, and it's almost like Mary and Elizabeth, right? Your baby kicked and my baby jumped, and so I want to thank you for one being creative and inspiring me. Two, I want to thank you for being a mini-manifesto contributor to iTunes America on loving and leading Black men and boys, where you have a mini-manifesto talking about the birthing and creative process. And so just thrilled. And for me and my book that I've been, it's been a lifelong dream, co-author, right? I got a co-author, Nick Childs. There are about a dozen mini manifesto contributors, and the final part of the book, Where Do We Go From Here? I have a whole team of folks that I call midwives, because I done pushed and pushed and pushed. I've heard the whole Caleb Breach story, where I certainly believe that the stuff that God truly wants us to deliver and create, we will never push out alone. We need to get in emotional, vulnerable stirrups and go to somebody and say, I need your help pulling this out, right? So I want to thank you for being one of those midwives, you and Stephen, right? And just pulling out this creative product and birth in me, right? And I want to ask you, what are you vulnerable about right now, right? As a creator, an innovator that's inside of you in the few minutes that we have.
My goodness. What am I vulnerable with right now? Yeah, I think I live that way. I think I live that way. I think I'm being vulnerable with my self-development, personal development. I'm asking really challenging questions to myself. I'm interviewing myself, not specifically just myself, but certain talents, gifts, behaviors that I have. Like, do you still need that? Why is that still around? Almost like skeletons in the closet, and then, really figuring out, like I said, it's like your constant process every day. Your breathing ashes is it's almost like a lifestyle. I think that would be an interesting goal to have. To me, the title itself is like, you're breathing, and at the same time, you're always in resurrection. And that takes really, really hard looks at yourself. There's parts in that book where I'm very authentic, and you can really, really see. I think it's in the beginning, but you can, like the intro, you can see I'm talking about like the burnout that comes from giving yourself away in so many different ways, to the point where you have nothing left because you burnt yourself down. And sometimes you have to run back into your own house and put the fire out. And so I think becoming that water that you were born with, and learning when the anxiety, that's a flame, right? The migraines, that's a flame. The inconsistent behavior, that's a flame. The lack of clarity, that's a flame. The imposter syndrome, that's a flame. Perfectionism, that's a flame. So there's all these different fires. We go on different names, but at the same time, they're burning down your potential, and they're blocks and they're creative resistances that you're creating, right? We're made in the image of the Most High, and if God is the creator, then we are the creatives walking our purpose. One of the most blasphemous things we can do is to not create anything, but to repeat the feedback loop that the world is giving us, because that is already done. And repeating the past gets in the way of building the future. It's almost like we're reliving this in a zombie-like death way. We have to create life. We have to imagine a different world in order to move past what we continue to create every score. So I think that's the, you asked me that, man, I think you added on to some talking points when I do these press tours too.
That's right. That's right.
And all these flames we have in the house, we become our own arsonists. So now let's become our own firefighters.
So before I turn it over to Steven to close, just want to say that I love you, man.
I love you too.
And I just want to use a quote in
love
your
you both.
There's a quote in your book, the eulogy for in the section eulogy for Brother Edgar, that highlights a lot of what you just said, and I just wanted to lift this quote up. When you say about Edgar, he always found ways to validate the positive and discover gold in the negative, right? And so get your copy of Breathing Ashes. It's on Amazon.com with Gregory Corbin. And Steven, you know I love you too. And thank you for creating the platform and sharing it and elevating voices like mine and like Greg.
Listen, want to thank you both. Love you both. Appreciate all the amazing gems shared. Blazer Nation was just loving this across all channels this morning. And I hope you guys continue to spread that word, because it needs to be shared on all platforms. But appreciate you both being here on trailblazers.fm.
Awesome.
Listen, everyone listening, go out today. Go find a way to rise above, go way beyond, and keep blazing your trail. Join me back here next Wednesday. I'm gonna keep this Shawn Dove train moving, man. I think Shawn needs to do a takeover. I've been challenging him to continue to push more in these media spaces as well, and I actually am encouraged. I said, hey, let's have a conversation on Wednesdays. He brought Greg to the table today. That just blessed my soul. So I'm going to challenge him to think of who we talk to next week and keep this thing going. But listen, enjoy your day, and look forward to connecting again soon. Cheers. Thanks for spending time with us today. If we aren't yet connected, let's keep the conversation going on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. Now, we grow when you subscribe, share, and invite others to check us out. We believe that others who consume these stories will be moved to make significant changes that have generational impact for many others, both now and well into the future. Blaze Nation, go out today and keep blazing.